Russell's back was pressed against the wall, his shuddering hands gripping the fire axe. The low emergency lighting filling the corridor indicated the lockdown was still in effect, although that was simultaneously a blessing and a curse. Sure, it meant that thing couldn't get out, hopefully, but it also meant that Russell was stuck in the wing of the facility with it. He had no idea if anyone else was left. He hadn't seen what had happened to Carpenter. Maybe it got him, or perhaps he had managed to give it the slip at the last second. There was no way of knowing for sure. It had all started so simply, so innocently, and with such noble intentions. If he had known it would lead to all this madness, Russell would have never put his name down on the request form. The SCP Foundation had been working on a way to neutralize or cure SCP-610 for what felt like forever. To one team of scientists, the infamously so-called flesh that hates was a fascinating organism. It was a highly contagious sarkic skin disease, isolated entirely within a small area of Siberia. That on its own wasn't enough to pique the interest of the research team led by Dr. Carpenter, including his hand-picked star researchers Russell and David, along with their assistant Clennon and Dr. Botten, an expert on infectious diseases who had recently joined their efforts to provide his specialist knowledge. What did captivate all of them, however, was what SCP-610 did when it infected a human being. The disease would trigger aggressive and uncontrollable mutations within its infected and could virtually rewrite their entire physiology in a heartbeat. The flesh that hates was capable of transforming a person's body into a horrifying fleshy mass of limbs and matter that barely resembled a human being anymore. And in addition, the infected individuals would retain some level of awareness, attacking any uninfected person with extreme hostility. There had long been chatter amongst some other research teams studying SCP-610 about devising a way to weaponize the disease. If they could somehow create a variant that didn't turn people into monsters, or at least cause the fleshy abominations to die shortly after mutation, then the Foundation or another interested party could deploy the flesh that hates as a biological weapon. Dr. Carpenter had long abhorred the idea, instead searching for a way to completely reverse the effects of an SCP-610 infection. It may have been idealistic, perhaps even naive by some standards, but the rest of his team was behind him in the pursuit of that noble goal, although not one of them knew it would soon cost them their lives. Hitting speed bump after speed bump in their research, the team were beginning to lose hope. Researcher David was the most outspoken in how tired he was of seeing the same results, yelling in frustration that the flesh could not be cured by conventional means. However, it was that outburst that gave Russell the idea. They had tried treating SCP-610 like a common virus, as if it was any other form of disease, largely thanks to Dr. Botten's input. And granted, that approach had taught them a lot about the flesh's ability to contaminate a subject from a single cell. But this infection was anomalous through and through. Could the solution to eradicating it for good lie not in a medical cure, but in another SCP? Russell brought this hypothesis to the rest of the research team, and each of them had suggestions for other anomalies they could potentially use to cure a subject of the flesh that hates. "We could get SCP-049 to take a look at the infected patient," Clennon suggested. "Oh, might work," Carpenter mused. "Although even if he cures someone, he might also kill them. He has his whole deal about ridding the world of the pestilence could prove to be a problem." There's always 682, David said dryly. "Have the reptile eat up all the SCP-610 infectees and voila, problem solved." "Oh, real helpful, David," researcher Russell retorted. "And what are we gonna do when SCP-682 adapts to the flesh? You really want an infected immortal lizard on the loose?" "Gentlemen, please," Dr. Botten spoke up. "We're forgetting one obvious option. I propose we submit a joint formal request to use SCP-914 for this experiment." Unanimously, the group all agreed that this was the best course of action. SCP-914, or the Clockworks, was a giant machine with two booths marked Input and Output. Although the Foundation still couldn't fully comprehend exactly how SCP-914 seemed to take any object placed within it and disassemble, recreate, improve, or destroy the item depending on its current setting. There was one issue, however. A prior failed experiment wherein a D-Class was placed in SCP-914 had led to some pretty disastrous consequences. As a result, ever since, no organic matter was to be placed within the clockworks, a rule that the team's experiment with the flesh would breach. Still, they pressed on, each of the 5 researchers signing their request to utilize SCP-914 before it was submitted to the Foundation higher-ups. Within hours, the request was denied, but the team was determined that SCP-914 could be the key to solving the Foundation's long-standing issue with SCP-610. Dr. Carpenter repealed the decision, urging the higher-ups to reconsider. He argued that this flouting of the no organic matter rule was necessary to potentially rid the world of the flesh that hates. After a few days of consideration, the request was finally, fatefully, granted. The team went to work immediately, requisitioning 2 test subjects, both of which had suffered SCP-610 infections and were horribly mutated. The pair of them were deemed a potential hazard to every member of Foundation staff on site, and as a result, the entire wing of the facility where the Clockworks was housed had to be evacuated for safety. Dressed in biohazard suits to protect themselves, the researchers used an electric cattle prod to coax the first flesh specimen into the input chamber of SCP-914. This was the test run. They wanted to see if the Clockworks would actually be able to affect those infected with SCP-610 at all. Plus, they needed a failsafe just in case something went wrong. And luckily, the machine had just the thing. Russell asked Clennon to set the Clockworks to rough, and with a click and whir of its numerous gears and gyros, SCP-914 came to life. Instantly, the infected test subject was completely obliterated. The setting had reduced it to atoms, disintegrating it on such a microscopic level that there was nothing left in the output chamber. The second infected creature seemed to bristle with anger, but didn't attack or become aggressive, as it too was prodded towards the Clockworks. Next, perhaps out of fear that their theory might be wrong, the team agreed to set SCP-914 to its 1-to-1 setting. Sure enough, the machine recreated another instance of a specimen infected with the flesh that hates, replacing the previous one. "We all know we're stalling," researcher David piped up. "Let's do what we came here for. Set the Clockworks to course." Nervously receiving a nod from Dr. Carpenter, Clennon stepped forward to switch the dial on SCP-914 to the course setting. This was the primary reason the team had all agreed to use the machine on a flesh specimen. This setting could disassemble any item placed in the input booth, separating it into its base components. Botten had suggested the use of SCP-914 based on the theory that, if it worked correctly, the Clockworks could extract the flesh that hates from its infected host, rendering them free of the disease. The machine made a colossal amount of noise as Clennon hurried back to a safe distance with the others. But as it was powering up, seconds from activating, Dr. Carpenter noticed something. The color drained from his face as he saw it. None of the others had noticed from a distance that the dial hadn't been set to coarse. Instead, it pointed to very fine, the highest refinement setting 914 had. "What the hell have you done?" Carpenter yelled at Clennon before the machine suddenly activated. What stepped free from the output booth stunned the researcher. It was a man, a seemingly ordinary human, who had presumably been infected by SCP-610 some time ago. He stepped nervously out of the machine, looking confused for a moment as a pair of Foundation security guards cautiously approached him. "We did it," Russell said in awe. Suddenly, fleshy tendrils burst forth from the man's arms, latching on to the approaching guards. They screamed in agony, their bodies melting become a bloody, misshapen mass that stayed attached to the humanoid creature at the center. It was like they became a part of it, the guards' arms and legs forming additional limbs as their forms were reconstituted and repurposed as part of a monster that was now crawling on its 6 legs towards the research team. In a blind panic, the group scrambled for the entrance, the head of the infected man splitting open down the middle, opening up into a wide, snapping pair of jaws. Panting hard as he ran, his breath fogging up the clear faceplate of the biohazard suit, Russell ran through the door, hearing someone close behind. He stopped for a moment, looking back to see the creature on the other side of the door, starting to spill through the doorframe like a liquid. Running faster around a corner, Russell came to another halt in the common area. A third security guard following just before a thick steel security door came slamming down, sealing the creature on the other side. "The other door didn't hold it! What good is that going to do?" Researcher David yelled. "More to the point," Dr. Carpenter said, turning and marching towards Clennon. He launched a furious punch at the assistant, knocking him to the floor. "Why did you set 914 to very fine, Clennon?" the enraged doctor shouted. You're the one who unleashed that abomination, you maniac! What? Clennon replied, fearfully trembling. I didn't, I swear I didn't. It said course. I'm sure of it. You expect us to believe that was a mistake? Gentlemen, we need to focus on the situation at hand, the security officer interjected. Regardless of who's responsible, we need to inform the Foundation higher-ups. There's an emergency lockdown, Russell replied. It would have triggered the moment the SCP-610 specimen got free. You've trapped us with a monster, Clennon, Dr. Carpenter spat. Hold on, researcher David spoke up. Wasn't it Botton's idea to use 914 in the first place? The common area fell silent as everyone turned to look at Dr. Botton. Did you plan for this, Doc? David pushed. Botton chuckled. Need I remind you, my friends, that we all agreed to use the clockworks, did we not? All of our names are on the request, he answered. Besides, accusing me, David, that's rather rich coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? The researcher fired back. Beckoning his finger, Botton encouraged the rest of the team to follow him across the common area to where a row of lockers stood, each door bearing one of their names. He gestured to the one labeled David. Go on, Botton added. Shooting him a dirty look, David barged past the disease expert and opened his locker. Not one among the group expected what would fall out. It was an old leather-bound book, symbols carved into the front cover. Instantly, thanks to the work studying SCP-610, the researchers all knew a text on Sarkicism when they saw one. It had been long known that the flesh that hates was often described in texts revered by Sarkic cults, who worship death, decay, and disease. What the hell, David? Russell exclaimed, picking up the book and examining it in disbelief. You're a Sarkist? Carpenter asked, the fury in his voice already elevating. No, I'm not! Researcher David protested. I've never seen that before! It was in your locker, the doctor yelled. You're one of those cannibal cultists! This was your plan! To refine the flesh for your twisted, death-worshipping religion! It certainly seems that way, Botton interjected. After all, Researcher David did seem frustrated at our earlier results. Impatient, even. You! David pointed at the doctor. You planted this in my locker! You're here a Sarkist, Clennon repeated in a nervous stammer. You made me turn the dial to very fine. You made that thing appear. You made me your accomplice! Anger tears streamed down his face. Clennon's hand reached for the security officer's gun and went to draw it, planning to shoot David on the spot. But as he went to pull the weapon from the guard's holster, it wouldn't budge. It was then that Assistant Clennon stared in horror at his hand. His fingers had fused to the guard's leg. The officer gave a twisted grin as his torso burst open, tendrils of flesh latching onto Clennon and assimilating him. Just like it had done before, the flesh creature broke down its victim's body, making it a new part of itself, a grotesque mass of limbs and bloody matter, littered with the discarded faces of those it had infected. The research team looked at it terrified, their stomachs turning, disgusted at the growing, growling abomination of bodies fused to one another. Oh, you're beautiful, Russell heard a voice whisper behind him. He turned to see Botton, looking at the SCP-610 creature and smiling. Researcher David was the closest, and the creature lunged at him, pulling his leg out from under him. Screaming in fear, the researcher fell onto the ground and was dragged towards the flesh. It pulled him in, his body stretching, skin tearing and bones snapping as he became part of it. A new set of limbs added to the monster. Dr. Carpenter went to try and pull him free, but it was already too late. But he stepped back, knowing that if he touched it, he would be infected too. The sound of running caught Russell's attention, and he spotted Botton making a break for it. Grabbing Dr. Carpenter by the sleeve, the researcher pulled him in the same direction, partly running away from the flesh as it assimilated David, and partly chasing the Sarkic saboteur. The pair of them quickly caught up to Botton, leaning over himself and panting breathlessly. Thank God you two made it, he wheezed after the run. I can't believe David could do this to unleash this nightmare upon us. Russell thought to snap at him, to scream how dare he keep lying, but Botton's back was to him now. He'd never get a better chance. There was a cabinet on the corridor wall containing a fire axe for emergencies. As carefully and quietly as he could, Russell fished the axe out of its case whilst Botton and Carpenter were looking away. We should get the Foundation to lift the lockdown, Botton was saying. They need to let us out and then— Oh! Oh! He let out a blood-curdling scream mid-sentence as the axe blade wounded him. Russell pulled it back, standing over the doctor as he fell to the floor in agony. Russell, have you lost your mind? Carpenter exclaimed. No, Doctor. He's the cultist. I have no idea how he tricked Clennon, but that flesh creature exists because of him, the researcher answered. From the floor, unable to move thanks to his injury, Dr. Botten began to laugh.
It took me years to infiltrate the Foundation. So much time waiting to gain access to that blessed flesh, he gloated. And now you've helped me to refine it, to create its ultimate form. You want to kill me? Go ahead, Russell. My life doesn't matter. For once that creature is free, it will bring about a new age of flesh, and Grand Karsus Iron will reward me for the role I played in unleashing it.
David was right, Carpenter realized.
Botten, you've planted that book on him to throw us off.
Doctor, we need to think of something, Researcher Russell interjected, axe still in hand. Nobody knows more about the flesh that hates than us. There must be a way to kill that thing. Otherwise, if it gets out of this lockdown, it could spread to everyone in the Foundation. What about fire? That's been effective against 610 infectees before, right?
Yes, but
the doctor desperately tried to think.
This new being we've created, he created,
Russell argued, looking at the grimacing, wounded Botten. We cannot deny the role we've all played in this, Researcher, Carpenter argued. And we have no idea if it possesses the same weaknesses as the flesh before its refinement. But we have to try, sir, the Researcher protested.
Of course, I agree.
The sickening sound of a slithering, slick mass was rapidly approaching. Still laying on the floor in pain, Dr. Botten had been dragged to the middle of a junction, with Carpenter and Russell hiding around either corner. Suddenly, Botten started hollering as the flesh came into view, practically calling it to him.
"Oh, look at you!" he exclaimed. "You're better than I could have ever hoped for!"
Looking down at him with the faces it had collected, the creature stabbed one of its disgusting appendages through Botten, drawing its body into its growing form.
"I am honored to give my life so that the age of flesh may begin,"
the doctor said weakly, through the pain as he was infected. From around the corner, Carpenter had taken the Sarkic text and set its pages on fire with a cigarette lighter. Turning to the creature, he hurled the mass of burning paper at it, hoping it would be enough fire to spread to the flesh while it was assimilating Botten, who they had left there as bait. The fiery book collided with the monstrosity. As Russell peeked around the corner, he saw the flesh retreating from the flames, Botten's body now added to it. For a moment, it seemed like the creature was afraid of the fire, but slowly it drew nearer and nearer to the book. With ease, it stamped down the flames with Botten's leg, dousing the fire and suffering no damage to it at all. Gripping the axe in his hands, Russell went to charge at the creature, only to feel something push him back. Dr. Carpenter had stopped him.
"Run!"
he yelled. Instantly, Russell turned and raced down the corridor, the sound of fleshy tentacles whipping through the air. He dared not look back, just in case the monster was right behind him. Eventually, he reached another corner and slammed his back against it, hands shuddering as he held on to the fire axe. He had no idea what had happened to Carpenter. Maybe it got him, or perhaps he had managed to give it the slip at the last second.
"Russell!"
came a hushed voice from around the corner, one the Researcher recognized. He turned to see Dr. Carpenter approaching him, sneaking like he was trying to avoid being heard.
"I think I managed to give it the slip,"
the doctor whispered. For a second, Russell backed up, his hands tightening around the axe handle. This might have looked like Dr. Carpenter, but was it?
"Are you really you, Doctor?"
he asked.
"Of course I am,"
Carpenter replied.
"You don't think that I'm not that monstrosity?"
Russell raised the axe defensively, only to notice the sadness in the doctor's face. Unable to bring himself to swing, even to find out, the Researcher lowered his weapon. Carpenter looked grateful.
"Come on, let's get them to lift this lockdown," he said. "I'm sure an MTF can step in and take care of our mistake."
As the pair of them cautiously made their way towards one of the locked doors, Dr. Carpenter reached out a hand to place it on Russell's shoulder. Now go and check out SCP-610 The Flesh That Hates and SCP-610 Tail Aftermath to experience more unspeakable horrors of the tainted flesh.